Hello, everyone. Welcome to Module 8. Today's topic is listening, and I'm going to be breaking it down, looking at different aspects of it, and also applying it to interpersonal relationships and conflict resolution. Mindful listening. It brings to mind that you need to pay attention and to focus more rather than mindless listening. Yeah. So I'm using the term mindful listening in the same way that Julia Wood does and lots of other communication professors who teach about listening. I'm going to now go into the objectives for today's presentation. So some things that you should be getting out of this presentation are knowing how to explain the difference between listening and hearing. You should also be able to identify the types of listening, describe the value of listening, the obstacles to listening, and also the components of the listening process, specifically when it's done well, and know about providing constructive feedback as a listener. The first distinction that I want to make is that between hearing and listening. So we all know what hearing is. Hearing is a physiological activity that involves sound waves hitting our eardrums. So the sound comes in, and when it gets in there and it hits our eardrums, it creates a sensation, and we hear all sorts of different types of things. If you become completely silent right now during my presentation, listen to what sounds are going on around you. I can hear noise from machines like air conditioners from the apartments next door. I can hear a TV going in another room in my house and so on. So hearing is just the way in which physical sound gets transmitted. The difference then between listening and hearing is that listening requires conscious attention, and it stimulates many sections of your brain. So if you look at this image that I put here of the many different parts of the brain and the fact that it's going from the messages get transmitted from one brain to the other, and as people listen, what's happening is that they are making meaning about this information, this sound. And we talked in class about the importance of the way people talk, speaking. That's so important. And all of these things interact and come together when we're listening. Perception and language and other features of what's going on when people listen. So what I want you to do right now is just think about that distinction between hearing and listening. Think about your own experiences with that, and then complete the discussion question. And when you're done with the discussion question for this little section, then come on back to the presentation. We're going to move on now to the types of listening. So different situations will call on us to engage different types of listening. So the first type that we all enjoy is listening for appreciation. So I bet a lot of you listen to music. I bet a lot of you listen to concerts. I bet a lot of you listen to the dialogue in films when you're watching movies, and you listen to your friends at parties to have a good time and so on. So this is listening for appreciation. Another type of listening that we do is engaging in fun interaction with people that we enjoy, friends, family, schoolmates, and other people that we might meet, coworkers. So we just engage in fun interaction because we're social creatures. And so we listen to each other for the purpose of really for playing, for bantering, for having a good time when we are engaged with other folks. Another type of listening that's super important to us as human beings is listening for social support. So when people tell us about their problems, tell us about their experiences, a lot of us process things by actually speaking to others about what's happened to us and get support. The support could be just knowing that other people care. The support could be people understanding us and helping us get clarity on how we're feeling. And there is something very therapeutic about talking about a situation, particularly traumatic situations that happen to us. It clears it, somehow it clears it from our minds and our bodies, and it helps us to be able to recover from these traumas. So social support is really important, but even just, it doesn't have to be traumatic, but just getting support, knowing people get us, they see where we're coming from, they understand what's happened, and also it helps us know that we're not alone and other people share our experiences. So social support serves a lot of functions, and this is this is a really important function to have relationships work well. Another thing that listening does, or the other type of situation we have, is informational exchange. So in that situation, we are listening to gather information, and typically we want to be able to use that information. So we need to be careful. We need to ask questions. We need to be critical about it. And yet we need to also be very open to try to take in the full meaning of what people are imparting to us when they are giving us information. Here we are, M8 discussion 2. And what I'd like to see you do is to complete this discussion question where you're going to talk about the types of listening situations. So go ahead, go to discussion question, and then come on back when you're done. Our next session is on the value of effective listening. One of the most important things that you can get out of effective listening is being a better student. Research shows a strong correlation between effective listening and being successful in school. So if you want to be a success at school, paying attention and practicing some of the things that we'll talk about for mindful listening can be helpful for that. When people are good listeners and their fellow employees and their bosses realize that they're good listeners, that creates a favorable impression. It shows that you're a good team player. It shows that you care, and it shows that you get what's happening, that you get what's going on, and that's going to allow you to be able to make better contributions. So it helps to create a better impression because you actually perform better as an employee, just like you do at school, and you're also a better team player, so people appreciate being your coworker when you're a good listener. Another positive outcome of strong listening is that it creates more satisfying romantic relationships. When people listen to each other, they get greater understanding, and they're able to respond to each other in a way that leads to greater satisfaction, and it creates more trust, and it creates more openness. So it's essential for effective and healthy relationships. For the same reason that good listening helps at work and also with romantic relationships, it helps to build stronger friendships because people feel connected, they feel understood, and it just generates a lot more pleasure being with people who listen to you than people who just ignore you or engage in pseudo listening, which we will be talking about pretty soon in this presentation. Finally, effective listening is really important to have a functional and healthy family. So for the same reasons, again, that effective listening helps with romantic relationships and with friendships, with families, it's really important. It's important for couples to communicate effectively so they understand each other and can resolve conflict. It's important for parents to understand their children, and it's important for children to understand their parents, and parents are responsible for teaching their children how to be effective communicators and effective listeners so that the family can get along better, understand each other better, and resolve conflicts, because being in a family means there is definitely going to be conflict. Finally, the effective listening really helps with collaboration and conflict resolution processes. Effective listening builds understanding, and that understanding and also the process of being listened to helps to build trust. So when there's trust in conflict resolution processes, you can get a lot further than when people lack trust for each other and hold information back. When there's good listening, you have more information that gets contributed to the pool of knowledge. So the pool of knowledge is the knowledge that gets developed between the people participating in the collaboration process. So whether you're collaborating because you're making group decisions, or you're collaborating because you're trying to think of a way to cooperatively resolve a conflict, that pool of knowledge is critical for getting information that helps get good solutions or good decisions. And the pool of knowledge, the greater the pool of knowledge, the more options that people are able to generate to come up with collaborative decisions and collaborative solutions to problems. And then finally, effective listening helps to lower tensions. When people are upset and they can see that they've been listened to, and when people empathize with them and get it and provide support, that lowers tension. And sometimes it just takes the tensions and the anger away from the situation. It just brings people together. So it's one of the most important components of effective conflict resolution and collaboration processes. Another positive outcome of effective listening is that it increases your self-esteem. And if you think about all the ways that effective listening can help your other relationships, it helps you do better at school. It helps you be a more effective employee and therefore a more appreciated employee. It helps you be a better friend and a more appreciated friend. It helps you be a better family member. It helps you be a better girlfriend, boyfriend, partner. All of these things lead to increased self-esteem. So that's the sum total of what you get from being a good listener. So it's definitely a set of skills and practices that are well worth investing some time in developing and mastering and being the best listener you possibly can be. So for quiz 1 in our module, then I want you to go and complete the quiz on the value of listening. When you're done, come on back to the presentation. Now we're getting into talking about the listening process. So the first component of the listening process is mental focus. It's really important to clear your mind of other matters, other things that are going on, things that are going on around you, things that might be on social media, things that might be happening in your life. You need to just focus to be an effective listener. Listening is also about body engagement. When you do lean in, when you make eye contact, when you nod your head to show that you're listening to folks. There's nonverbal ways that you communicate that you're listening that are really important and really help the person feel listened to and understood. Another component is curiosity. When you're curious, then you want to understand and you ask questions to be able to help develop that understanding. And you set aside judgments instead of being critical and thinking judgmental things about what's happening. You want to get curious to try to get underneath it or even behind it or to the side of it and just try to really fully understand what people are telling us. That really helps you be a better listener. Think of yourself as a detective rather than a judge. So some specific skills that are very helpful in being a good listener are restating. So restating is repeating back what the person is telling you, and that helps the person know that you heard them. It's a form of acknowledgement. The other thing that restating can do is it can help with what's next, which is clarifying. Because if you restate and the person says, no, that's not what I'm talking about, then that helps with the next step, which is clarifying. Now, clarifying can also come from you asking questions to make sure you understand what's going on. And if you stick with that attitude of curiosity, those questions will come to help elucidate, to amplify, to really develop, and to get a strong understanding about what people are talking about. The next component, validating, is letting the people that are talking to you know that what they're saying is understandable and valid, and you may actually have even shared that experience with them, or you can empathize with what they're doing. I sometimes think of it as like getting your parking pass validated when you go to the movies or you go to a shopping mall or something, and you take a piece of paper that's worthless and you give it to the people and they put a stamp on it, and then that validation, that stamp, actually makes it worth something, so that you go out and you put it in the parking machine and then you don't have to pay. So it turned a worthless piece of oak tag paper into something that's worth something. So when you validate people, you want to make them feel worthwhile. You want to show the importance of what they're saying and what they're doing in their life, so that they feel like they're confirmed as human beings. So that's another thing that really helps with listening. So even if you disagree with what people are saying, you can still understand their motivations and what they were experiencing that might bring them to engage or behave in the way that they did, or have the opinion that they have. You can step into their shoes. So those are the 6 components that I wanted to share with you today to try to help you become better listeners. And if you already are practicing some of these things, this is fantastic. Look for the things that you think you can strengthen, or anything that you might be leaving out. Now, another thing that helps to be a better listener is to know what the obstacles are, so that you can try to remove the obstacles from your listening situation. So the first set of obstacles are the external obstacles, and we have one of those being competing messages. So this could be noise that's coming in, or the noise is listed there on the bottom, or other people trying to talk to you, or when you're trying to read what's on your cell phone screen instead of attending to the person that's sitting there in front of you. So these are very common distractions these days. Okay, so those are the competing messages that are coming in, or you're in a place that's noisy, so you can't really hear what people are telling you. So that's one thing, is trying to clear out competing messages. The next obstacle is the message complexity. So if you don't understand what people are saying to you, then that can interfere with listening, because for everything that you don't understand, you start getting lost, and then you can't follow what they're talking about. So recognizing that, making sure that you find a way to elucidate the things that you don't know, or don't put yourself in a situation where you know that the messages are going to be so complex you won't understand what people are talking about. So, and noise it could be physical noise. It could be like in this photo, you have a concert going on. It could be a lawnmower out the window. It could be the blender at the coffee shop. There's different noise that also creates obstacles. So being aware of that, knowing what are the things that could interfere with your being able to be a good listener, to receive those messages that are being sent to you, is good. To remove yourself, put yourself in a different space if the space isn't working for you, or if you need to just shut down your phone so that you won't keep getting pings that are distracting you. Some more obstacles then come from inside of our minds. These are the internal obstacles. So this could be preoccupation. So if you're having a situation in your life that's challenging or emotionally triggering or just time consuming, those things, your mind can go to those, and instead of listening to what's the situation at hand, the person in front of you. So preoccupation is one thing. Another is prejudgment. This can be because you don't like what the person's saying, or you just assume you already know what they're trying to say and you're jumping to conclusions so that you're not being patient to just listen thoroughly to what people are trying to tell you. The next is when you have an emotional reaction to loaded language. So they're speaking in ways that makes you start getting triggered. You don't like it, you find it offensive, it's scary. They're all different. Any type of emotion can interfere with your listening. So being aware of that and being to breathe through it, or being able to address it, like saying, I can't listen to that. I find that to be very threatening and I need that to be, said in a different way. So your reactions, you just need to be aware of them, and then you need to figure out what you want to do with those emotional reactions. Another obstacle is a lack of effort, when you're just either too tired or you just don't care enough to put in the effort that it takes, because effective listening takes work. It doesn't come automatically. It's different than just hearing. It requires mental effort. So if you don't put in the mental effort, then you can't be an effective listener. And then the failure to adapt to different listening styles or to the different situations. So we talked about different situations. So when you're just listening to music for pleasure while you're doing chores in the house, you don't have to attend whatever comes naturally. It's just totally fine, and you can do that. But that's not the kind of listening you want to do when someone is telling you about a serious problem, or when someone's upset with you and they want to work out a conflict. You've got to adjust that listening so that it can fit for the specific situation. So that's why I talked about the different situations in this presentation, to recognize that you could have a different way of being an effective listener in different situations. Some forms of non-listening, people are putting forward that they are listening, but actually they're not really listening, because they're doing other things instead of the things that I just talked about. So I'm going to go over some of these forms of non-listening. Okay. So the first one is pseudo listening, and that's when you pretend like you're listening. So someone's talking to you and you're like, but you're not really paying attention to what they're saying. And that could be because of what I said before, with internal distractions, being preoccupied with something, or it could be because you keep on looking at your cell phone, alternative messages coming in, or listening to music and so on. You're not really paying attention, but you're just pretending like you're but you're not. You're thinking about other things or looking at other things. Monopolizing is when you keep on trying to take the focus of the conversation away from whatever the person is talking about. So it could be because you just want to dominate, as in some of the debates that we've seen recently on TV, like trying to interrupt and change it to what you want to talk about. Or it can also happen because you're uncomfortable with what's being said and you want to change the topic because you don't want to hear what the person's saying. So it can be for different motives, but the same outcome is that you keep on redirecting the conversation to your own agenda instead of listening to the other person and following their agenda for a while. Selective listening is when you just listen for what you want to listen to and then just ignore the rest. Like in my case, when students come in and they don't pay attention until I say, and so on the exam, and all of a sudden they start listening because I said exam, and they weren't listening before that. They were preoccupied, or they were watching their cell phones or doing something else. Okay. And so people will do that. Another type of listening is defensive listening. So that's when you get, you feel triggered, emotionally triggered, and then you start to defend. And typically people defend themselves by attacking the other person. So, or making up excuses. So you're not really listening to what the person's telling you, but you're finding a way to defend yourself over the perceived threat that you think is coming from the other person. Ambushing is when you just sit there and wait for people to say something so that you can just jump on it and attack them. So you're just listening for the pieces of information that you can use as a counter argument to tear them down. And finally, then we have literal listening, when you just listen to the words, but you're not listening to the feelings and the part of it that where it's the person is revealing what's important to them, their identity. Okay, you're just listening to the words and you're just reacting to that, but not trying to fully understand that other person. So those are some ways that people pretend or could actually state that they're listening, but we know they're not really listening, and it's because of the quality of their listening and the lack of focus and mindfulness in it. That's why I call it non-listening, and that's also what Julia Wood calls it, is non-listening. Now that we've looked at obstacles and pseudo-listening, you can go ahead and complete quiz number 2 of module 8, which is on that portion of the presentation. And when you're done, come on back. So some things that are really important to bear in mind for effective listening are to clarify what are your goals. So if you are listening for pleasure, then you don't have to worry about how effective you are as long as you're having a good time. That's the only criteria. But if you're listening for information, then you want to do the following. You want to be mindful. You want to see what you're doing internally and what you're doing with your body. Are you communicating that you're listening, or are you doing something else? So be mindful. Also, try to control those obstacles that we just talked about. Try to clear your mind before you walk into a meeting where you have to talk to somebody. Okay, and if you have to, shut up the cell phone or turn the sound off or do something so it doesn't keep on interrupting you. Another thing that really helps is to ask questions, because that both allows you to clarify anything that you don't fully understand, and it also communicates to the other person that you're paying attention and you care and you want to know more. It says use aids to recall. Now, a lot of people find taking notes is very, very helpful, and we do that in class, but we also do it as mediators when we're trying to help people solve a conflict. So anytime that you're in a situation where it's important for you to remember what people are talking about at meetings, people who bring notes to meetings and bring a notebook and can take notes, or their laptop and take notes at meeting, then you know they're really paying attention. So it communicates that you're really paying attention, but it's also an aid that helps you, because the process of writing it down actually helps you remember it. Other people create mnemonic devices and do other things to try to remember. So whatever it is that you can do, you want to do that. And then finally, organizing information. So as you're listening, you could be organizing it in your head, or you can organize it on paper. You could take the notes and then organize it. But these are ways to help you to pay more attention and to understand it better, because when it's organized, it's more logical for you and easier to remember. Another way that you want to make sure you're adapting your listening to your specific goals is to think about if what you're trying to do is to support people. Okay, so these are the guidelines that I've been using for many years for doing active listening to show support when I'm listening to someone. And it's the same guidelines that I use when I teach people how to mediate conflict, where there's two people talking and they want to help those two people resolve their conflicts. Okay. So the first one is to encourage people. So some of that is we do that non-verbally by making eye contact, by having an open expression in our face, by nodding, by doing the forward lean. These are all things that help encourage people. And it could be by also saying things like, okay, come on, tell me more, and asking questions. Those are all things that encourage people. The next thing that I mentioned earlier is to restate the content. So that's when you literally state what they're saying, but it typically seems more authentic, and it feels less condescending if you restate it in your own words instead of just repeating back. Sometimes when we repeat back, people feel like they're being mocked. or that they're being condescended to. So it's better to restate it in your own words. So you want to really listen carefully and figure out, how can I say this in my own words, and then feed it back to people so they can see that you're listening to them. And then, as I said before, they can also make some corrections. Another skill for active listening is to reflect back people's feelings. So you just did restating of the content. Reflecting the feelings is trying to mirror what are the feelings. So you're feeling pretty upset about this, or wow, that must be really sad, or that's great, that's exciting. So when you mirror people's feelings and actually state them, it helps people know that you understand. And when people are upset, it does something to help lower the tensions and relieve some of that upsetness when you actually just use words to identify the feelings that you are perceiving that people are having as they talk to you. And then asking questions. So asking questions shows your engagement, and it also helps to get clearer on what the situation is, so that it increases your understanding. The last one here, validate, is when you let the people know they're worthwhile. And I talked about this before. It's like, stamping that parking pass so that you can go and have that piece of paper worth something. So you want to make people feel important. You want to make them feel worthwhile. You want to make people feel understood, and that will help them it will help them know that you get them on an emotional level as well as on just the content level of what they're talking about. As we're moving towards the end here, I just wanted to mention that social media it's influencing our communication processes in general. So of course it's going to influence our listening processes. And some social media, they do engage us in listening. So if you're, listening to all these videos that get sent out through social media, it engages us in listening to them. And at the same time is that it can engage us in listening, can also be very distracting to be constantly having social media just, I was going to say invading, but that feels a little violent. So, but constantly intruding on our lives, right? We just keep getting these dings that we got another message, and then in that message could be another video or another newspaper article or some statements some friends are making. So we're constantly getting distracted from whatever it is that we might be engaged in, whatever people are around us in the face-to-face situation. We're getting all the social media that's feeding in to our immediate interactions with people face-to-face. So that's something to be aware of, is how it could be very distracting. And then it's really important to be using your critical thinking skills, because anybody can post anything on social media. And we have a huge problem today with disinformation, lies that are being sent to us, and disinformation campaigns, and millions of dollars are being spent by people who want to have more power and control over us, sending us messages that are just full of bunk. So we want to use critical thinking to evaluate the messages that come through social media, because there's no screening that goes on. It just, there's controversies now about Facebook or Twitter and so on, maybe taking some actions to try to weed some stuff out that's harmful, but it's hard for people to make those decisions about what's harmful. So we are best armed when we can do this for ourselves, to understand how to think critically, to know how to look up sources, to do fact checking on the information that comes at us, so that we're not bamboozled into thinking stuff that isn't even true. Okay, and then we have my closing slide here is just a quick guide to mindful listening. So the first guide is to be aware of your listening roadblocks and to clear your internal, external distractions and be really focused on whoever's speaking, to engage mentally and physically. Remember, your body language is really important here. Stay curious to be engaged, and to stay away from getting judgment. Just keep asking questions and try to get inside their head like a detective, not a judge. restate what they're saying. So repeat back in your own words what they're talking about. Reflect back the feelings that you're picking up that they have and name them, label them, validate them as people and validate their feelings and their experiences, and also clarify, get clear, really clear on what they're saying to really understand them. So if you follow these guidelines, this will really help you be a better listener. And being a good listener is the key to being a good negotiator whenever you have anything to be negotiated or you have conflict. And it's also the key to being a mediator. If you want to be a good mediator, helps other people solve problems. It's also great to be a facilitator. It's essential. You have to be a really good listener to be a meeting facilitator. We have made it to the third and final quiz for today's module, which is on effective listening. Once you're done with that, you're finished with our module. And I look forward to seeing you in class. We'll be doing some interactive exercises on listening. Take care.